Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's fabulous 3Shape webinar on same-day dentistry. We are actually coming to you live from two different locations around the world. So presenting to you the man of the hour, our main presenter today, Dr. Watts. He's live from UK. Hi, Doug.
Hi.
And from the 3Shape headquarters here in Copenhagen, we have me. I'm going to be co-hosting with Doug today. I'm a global training and application specialist for 3Shape, and basically I will just be asking some tricky questions from Doug whenever needed. And also, last but not least, we have Johanne Carlsen.
Hello. I'm just here as the facilitator today. So if you have any questions, you can actually see on your webinar console that there is a Q&A chat window. So please just fill in your questions as we go along. We're going to try and answer them during the presentation, but if we don't get to them, we will take them at the end of the webinar. Some other things you can see on your screen, a lot of different windows. You can minimize, maximize, move them around as you see fit. All the little widgets at the bottom can open or close any of the windows. We also have, for instance, an idea box. So any ideas for future versions of Trios Design Studio, feel free to enter them there. And I will leave it up to you.
So today's presenter, Dr. Doug Watt, is a partner at Houston Place Dental Practice, and we will let Doug take over in just a few minutes. Before that, I will give you, let's say, a short overview on what 3Shape same-day dentistry solution is all about. And just before we get started, we would actually like to ask you what your role in the dental practice is and what are you guys doing. So we would like to know who we are talking to today. So please, if you have access to this screen right now, just go ahead and answer the poll question, and we will take that in just a few seconds. Apparently, we didn't take the poll at this point. Let's just move on. So I will now just explain to you the 3Shape same-day dentistry solution and how that blends in with the rest of 3Shape products. As you may already know, 3Shape offers a huge variety of digital dentistry solutions. And basically the things that you can do with our solutions are quite amazing, and they can be very, very advanced. But at the same time, we know that not every customer wants to do everything they do. You may not want to start with a full jaw rehabilitation on your first go. So our approach to the digital journey that we offer to the customers is that you can start with just scanning and sending out to the lab. And when you get more comfortable with the solution, you can actually add things that you actually want to, let's say, take into your day-to-day practice. And this is what we mean by talking about in-house production apps and also patient excitement apps. And today, our main topic is, of course, Trios Design Studio, which is our solution for the same-day dentistry approach. Now, 3Shape Trios Design Studio is basically a combination of our intraoral scanner, the Trios, which delivers beautiful scanning experience with studied accuracy. It's an award-winning product. We also have a design software where basically you will be guided through the necessary steps to actually provide a high-quality piece of prosthetics for the patient. And then, of course, we cover the production, and in this case, we offer you a range of mills that you can choose from. And also, of course, you have the option to go for an SDL output, which basically allows you to produce your restorations wherever you want. And yeah, let's go on to the next slide. This is actually something that I believe also Doug can say something to. We think that it is important for everyone to, let's say, work with the kind of restorations that they feel happy working with. So if it is just a molar crown or let's say an inlay that you want to be producing, and let's say anything that's more complicated than that, or let's say more advanced than that, you might want to send out to a lab. Or what do you say, Doc? Do you sometimes, let's say, if you, for example, you're very busy, will you then send an indication to a lab and let's say go about it that way? Or what's your approach?
I mean, you've got a single central incisor. You're not going to be able to do all the characterization, staining, translucency of the tips, all that kind of stuff. So in that kind of situation, you're better off sending it off to a lab for, say, a layered zirconia crown, which you're never going to produce in-house. However, if it's a, molar onlay or something, absolutely no problem whatsoever with producing that in-house. Also, sort of complex, sort of multiple anterior units where you want a more natural look, or you want different layers, all that kind of stuff can go off to a lab. Copying previous designs where you need a bit more functionality, again, implant crowns where you've got angles of abutments and screw-retained crowns. There is a screw-retained workflow with tie bases in the Trios Design Studio. However, certain cases you're going to want to send to a lab rather than doing it in-house. So yeah, certainly there's loads of different reasons why you might do things in-house, or just send it off to your chosen lab and get them to produce it for you instead.
But at the end of the day, you enjoy a certain flexibility where you can make the decision on the spot and go with that. And that, I think, is one of the big benefits of the solution.
Yeah, having an open system whereby I can just scan it and I can just, either export an STL or send it, or just do what I want with that data, makes it a really easy to use workflow. And it just means I can do what I want with regards to lab work, in-house manufacture. I'll go through all this later, but we produce our own surgical guides and things like that. But yeah, it's nice having that freedom to do what I want to with the data I get off the scanner.
That's cool. Moving on to the next slide. We already touched base with the flexibility of the solution, but that is basically something that separates us from a lot of the other, let's say, same-day dentistry solutions out there in the market. So just to give you some more details on that, basically, you may know that we have multiple generations of the Trios scanner and also different kinds of versions of it. So to fit any need and any budget, you can basically select your own piece of intraoral scanning hardware from the portfolio. Also, the ability to either do it yourself or send out to a lab is something that adds to the flexibility. Also, the fact that we have got a seamless integration with some of the best milling machines out there, and also the ability to just take out pure STL files and produce them however you want. And last but not least, this is also something that Doug will, let's say, explain to you more about. 3Shape offers a variety of different kinds of solutions, software and hardware for more advanced indications and catering to different specialties within dentistry. So you do have the option of expanding your offering to these things as well. And of course, our solution basically, it grows with you. So whenever you're ready to take on the next step, you can basically scale the solution and expand your offering, and you can do it at your own pace and at your own budget. So that's basically where let's say the beauty of the scalability and the flexibility really comes to life. Right. We have already discussed some of the mills that we have in our, let's say, range of integrated solutions. And what does this integration actually mean? to put it into a couple words, you basically, as a user, will operate in a seamless workflow, not exiting the same piece of software until you actually have to insert a milling block inside a milling machine. So basically, our job as the ones making the integrations is to make the solution as smooth and easy as possible for the end user or the customer to go through, without them having to import or export anything. And basically, everything needs to look nice and simple for them behind the user interface. What we have to do in order to make all of this happen internally here at 3Shape and together with our partners, we make sure that every indication works with every material. And basically, if we ever change anything, we always need to make sure that the same quality in the final outcome of the product is there. So we do hundreds and hundreds of tests every time we basically launch an integration. And it is not just the internal validation that we do together with our engineers and dental technicians here at 3Shape. We also have our beta testers, the actual clinicians working with patients, making sure that after we have said something is okay, it actually does work in the clinical environment the same way. And this is what we call the trusted connection. Trusted connection means that everything happens pretty much automatically. You really do not need to bother yourself with let's say, most things, because they are happening in the background. We have got all the relevant indications and materials available for you, and the validation also covers the fact that we try to make sure that there is minimum shaping and the surface quality of the restoration is always good enough or really good. And then, of course, as we are working with multiple partners, we make sure that even though there are different softwares running in the background, you always get the same user experience. And of course, we try to minimize any need for manual fitting of restoration. So we know that in same-day dentistry approach, you do not actually have a model to check things with. So this is something that we are basically covering for you. Now, this is just an example of the trusted connections mills that we have on offer. We have the Amangeva, VHF, Straumann mill, the DG shapes mills, and Lyra mills, and as the newest addition to the portfolio, we also have the Ivoclar PM1 Programmill 1 mill, and that will be available for customers. Was it at the end of this year or early next year? What's the official?
The official wording or the official statement is that they're actually doing a soft launch right now in some countries, but officially the mass market launch is happening next year, in the beginning of next year. So from around February.
And we are, of course, adding more and more partners as we go along. And well, you will just have to stay tuned to figure out what's going to happen next, and we will be sure to let you know exactly about all of the new updates that are coming on. Now I think it's time to hand over the reins to Doug over there. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Good. The next slide will be all yours. So.
Okay. Right. So yes, as Jenny said, my name's Doug Watt. I'm a partner at Euston Place Dental Practice in Leamington Spa in the UK. So you can see here on the right-hand side, this is the practice where I'm working currently. I've been a partner here for about 6.5 years, and we've sort of gone quite heavily into the digital workflow, especially over the last 3 years. I sort of invested in a Trios, and since then we've sort of gone through the scanning. We started our first sort of in-house production from the Trios was using Implant Studio to design our own surgical guides, and we're printing those using the Rapid Shape D20 printer. So let's see that in the middle at the top. We then got the complete restorative package and started doing some digital mock-ups and a bit more restorative work with that and starting designing our own restorations, and we then integrated a Roland DWX 42W mill. And since that, we've then moved over to using Trios Design Studio to do our crown designs and same-day dentistry. So that's really been over the last year or so that we've been doing that. We've also got lots of other tech in the practice and a bit addicted to it, but that's another matter entirely. So I think we're on a poll question now. So how many people are using a scanner today? And I've been told I have to wait a few seconds now. So talk amongst yourselves. Obviously, there's so many scanners out there. I tested a few scanners, and the Trios worked really well for me because I had a trial case where I tested it out, fitted a couple of restorations based on it, and the fit was perfect. And then I did another case, and then I was sold. And the second case was actually 6 anterior units sent to a lab, fitted all very well, minimal adjustment, and I was skeptical about digital and not having a putty impression and physical model to work on until I fitted that case, and that's when I first thought I had to get involved in it. So I'll move on, see if anyone's answered this one. So we have 75% not scanning and 25% are scanning. So yeah, that's so we need to get a conversion going there.
So Doug, would you say that it really is a good way to, let's say, if you're in doubt, just make sure that you try a few indications out and see how it works for you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as I say, my first case, I scanned 2 preps, sent it off to the lab, got that back and fitted it. And, I was very skeptical about the fit, but I needed no occlusal adjustment, no contact point adjustment. The marginal fit was perfect. Everything worked really well. So I think, testing it out, because a big part of this is a leap of faith, because you're investing money into it. You're also going for a completely unknown situation, and people can be somewhat distrusting of technology, especially if they don't know if it's going to work. Now, I think the world is becoming far and far more tech-based, and if dentistry is still working on plaster models and impressions, then we're going to get left behind. And I think now is the sweet spot with regards to digital dentistry, where everyone needs to be getting involved. So in 5-10 years' time, you're not trying to jump on the bandwagon after the ship's already sailed, if that makes sense. I think I'm mixing up my analogies there. So benefits of chairside, obviously, on this slide here. So your predictability is there, and the control. So you have complete control over the restorative side of things. The predictability of fit is also amazing. I'll show you some x-rays later on of cases I've done where we've got a really nice, you don't see cement loops, anything like that. So that level of predictability and control is much better than I've ever experienced with taking impression and sending it to a lab. There's so many different stages that can go wrong. Whereas with data, if the scan's good, the restoration should be good. Efficiency for patient and dentist. Again, I'll go into this in a bit more detail later, but if you're milling and fitting chairside, there's no temporary to make. There's no refix appointments for temporaries, especially these days where we're probably doing slightly less retentive preps with more relying on bonding, especially for EMAX crown, so you don't have that issue where you've got a not very retentive temporary and it pops off and you need to rebond it or re-cement it all the time. Costing, you've obviously got a reduced lab fee. That's offsets the initial outlay for the equipment if you're doing chairside. So I think the point at which the switchover is around 10 indirect units a month. If between you and any other dentist in the practice you're doing 10 or more indirect units a month, I think it makes sense to then step into chairside, or not even necessarily chairside on the same day, just in-house production, because your cost for producing a unit drops to just the cost of getting whatever block you're using, and then the actual mill and all the equipment is an outlay, but that will be paid back by the lab savings you're making from not using a lab for all your restorative work. As Jenny was saying earlier, you will still be using a lab for a lot of things. However, if you can do a lot of your posterior units in-house, it makes it a lot more cost effective. Retrievability, and what I mean by that is that you then have the scan. You can, for example, re-mill a crown. If you did have a patient, crown drops off and they swallow it, then you can just re-mill it. You don't have to then rescan and everything like that. You've got the original data. You don't have that problem. Hopefully with bonded Emacs, it won't just drop off and the patient will swallow it. But that is a benefit of having all that data there. You've got the actual crown file stored on there. And you could potentially even just use that crown file, export it as an STL file, and then have it made in a different material. If, for example, you had a Bruxa, you made an Emacs, it broke, and you wanted just to make that crown in zirconia or something, you can then send that STL and get that milled by someone else who is doing zirconia milling if you're not doing it in-house. And then job and patient satisfaction. So obviously patients prefer not to have temporaries coming out, and not have to come back all the time. And I personally enjoy doing the little bit of chairside manufacture, just because it lets me do something a bit different from staring into a patient's mouth all the time. So from a enjoyment perspective, I've been more excited about dentistry since I've been doing digital scanning and doing all the digital work than I was before. So yeah, it's a no-brainer for me. So the importance of choosing an open system, as we said earlier, this is really a big thing, because you want to be able to use that data and send it wherever you want and produce it however you want. So if you choose an open system, you can send it to any lab. It doesn't need to be a specific lab with certain software, certain mills, certain things. So if you can export an STL file, or I believe 3Shape are now looking at PLY file export as well. I saw if you can export these files, it can be imported into any other open system, and then it can be used to generate your restorative work, or whatever you want to do with it. Chairside, again, to those open mills and with those trusted connections that were shown earlier, that level of predictability from that trusted connection means that any mill is going to produce a really outstanding restoration. Integration into other systems. So this is where implant planning and things come in. So we use a Sirona Orthofos CBCT scanner, which we've had for years, but I can easily export my CBCT scan from that, put it into Implant Studio, and then use that along with my Trios scan to design my implant positions, and then design my implant guides, export that and 3D print it on another company's 3D printer, so the rapid shape printer. So in that workflow, I'm using a Sirona CT scanner, rapid shape printer, and 3Shape scanner, and then 3Shape software to put everything together. So you've got all those different systems you can put in together. So that means that if you have pre-existing equipment, it doesn't limit you to that company. You can then, say, use a Trios scanner and still not worry about having another make of CT scanner. So that was great for me, because I mean, we already had that scanner in place, so I didn't have a problem integrating my Trios with that, and the Implant Studio and all the different bits of equipment worked well together. Tips and tricks and what to consider. So cost implications, we covered that briefly. So that's the offset of the lab fee versus the cost of the equipment. Again, as Jenny was saying, you've got do you want to actually be scanning and milling, or do you just start with scanning, see how you get on with that? And that's exactly what I did. I started scanning, making sure I got on with the scanning, outsourcing it to a lab, and then milling at the lab and getting them back. And then once I was comfortable with the scanning, I was happy with the fit of the restorations, then we added the milling in later. Or just, I know some people I've spoken to have just gone for the whole shebang straight off and jumped in with both feet and bought scanners, mills, printers, implant software, everything all at the same time, which, if that's what you want to do, it's a learning curve, but it works well. Actually, it's not as much of a learning curve as it was a few years ago, so it's a lot easier, especially with things like the design studio. Now, this next bit, dentist availability and diary zoning, this is a big thing for same day. So a lot of the time now I'm booked up quite far in advance. And if I want to book a same day restoration, I need 2.5 hours worth of appointment time to do that. And if I don't have that time in my book, then I'm going to do it as a delayed restoration. So that's something to consider within your diary. If you're going to have availability, or if you're zoned or you have treatment sessions, keep those free for same day restoration, so you can actually do that same day rather than having to just fit a temporary and get it back later. But again, your first cases, you'll probably want to do that anyway.
Do you generally try to, let's say, have days where you try to book a lot of, let's say, same-day dentistry patients, or do you just randomly drop them wherever you can? Do you have a strategy to this?
At the moment, my Fridays are generally kept for long treatments. So on Fridays, I do my implant treatments, my crown and bridge work, my more complex things. Obviously, I will fit treatments in elsewhere, depending on the patient's request. However, it's nice to have a Friday where I'm not booked up for 6 or 8 weeks ahead, where I can fit the bigger appointments in, because otherwise it just wouldn't. I don't know how everyone else's day list runs, but sometimes I'll look through and there'll be a nice massive white space, and in the middle of it's a 10-minute checkup, and that sort of means that is completely unusable unless you start moving patients around. So I tend to keep sessions for that, or zoning your book so you have got these treatment sessions available is really helpful. So we do that, and other people in the practice zone their diaries in different ways, but that's the way I've done it. Things to consider: mill maintenance. Now my nurse does all the maintenance in the mill, so she sets it up, and there are a few different things you have to do with the roller, which I'll cover in a minute. Set up and ensure the software is started up and ready to go. So you don't want to scan, then get the scan sent off ready to design and get the crown made, and then discover you've got to start up the computer, boot in the software, go if it's on a separate system. It depends whether you're using the Trios on a laptop or the Move, whether you're using the software on there or on a different system. So that's how much can the staff do to help you set all that up. Again, burrs and coolant changing and logging of maintenance. It's relatively straightforward, but it all needs to be done. And then stocks of blocks and material. So taking the shade and planning that when you come to actually plan the crown, rather than on the day take the shade and discover you haven't got that in stock and can't do it. So again, I'll talk about that a bit later with some cases. So this is the important thing you need to consider, is what you actually need. So intraoral scanner is obviously a prerequisite for this. Design software, so this is where Trios Design Studio comes in. CAM software, so historically we were using a computer-aided manufacturer software that was separate before this trusted connection. Now it's all integrated into the Design Studio, which means you don't have that extra step. The mill and the compressor is a query, simply because the Roland mill doesn't have a compressor inbuilt. I know the Program Mill 1 does have an inbuilt compressor, and you don't need a separate compressor. So depending on what mill you're going for, you need to consider whether, because that's an additional cost, an additional thing you need to know where you're going to put within your practice. And finally, if you're going to be using Emax or zirconia, you need a glazing oven, and it needs to be the correct glazing oven for that. So glazing oven that does Emax doesn't necessarily do zirconia, so it's a longer, different cycle. So that's a consideration as well. So how was the learning experience? Well, how I did it, as I said, I acquired the scanner, and then we got the printer and Implant Studio and started producing in-house guides. Then the E1 scanner, which is a model scanner we got with the dental systems, and the reason we bought that was to archive a load of old study models we had in the loft. We had thousands of study models. We didn't know what to do with them because we couldn't get rid of them all, but we didn't want to keep them either. So we used a model scanner to get rid of those and archive them, and also got the dental system software along with that. And that's when we started with the in-house production using the Roland mill. We're doing crowns and onlays, and initially we were outputting it via an STL file into Millbox, which is the Roland CAM software. And then once we got the moved from Dental Systems onto the Trios Design Studio. We got that trusted connection with the Ron DWX42W and started producing the same day restoration straight out of Design Studio, which is a much more efficient workflow. So from a digital perspective, I just thought I'd put some interesting cases in and things I've tried since starting. We don't have much time, so I'm just going to rattle through this. So this was a case of a patient who had a tumor removed from their hard and soft palate, and I would have been terrified taking the impression of that, because all that impression material would have gone straight up into their nose and locked in place. And also having the Trios there, that made making this patient a new obturator far more easy, because I could just scan it without having to fill their nose with impression material. This was a case of digital mock-up with a DSD mock-up. We did the digital mock-up on Dental Systems, 3D printed a model and a clear putty matrix, covered the teeth with PTFE tape, put composite into the matrix, cured it, and produced a little composite veneer, and then characterized it, and then bonded that in with heated composite and polished it. So a way of transferring digital mock-up into the mouth relatively easily and getting a really accurate transfer from the printed model to the intraoral restoration. This was a case where we did some crown lengthening surgery, and then, I didn't mean to do that, sorry, I'll go back. My hand getting loose. So yeah, gummy smile, and 4 old failing veneers, and they presented originally with a chip on the upper left central incisor. So I did Trios scans, digital mock-up, 3D DSD mock-up, planned the crown lengthening surgery using the digital software, and then that's after 2 weeks of healing and smoothing things down. Digital crown design, and then bonded all the restorations under rubber dam, so we got rid of the gummy smile. These restorations were monolithic milled Emax, so again we could have done that in-house if we'd had the stuff then, but at that time we didn't. Whether I would have done them in-house again, probably would have sent them off for a lab to design, just because it's a relatively big case, and the amount of time it would take me to do that versus a lab would have been pointless. Right, and so that's the crown lengthening part of that. And then this was just an implant case where we did a 3D printed bridge. Don't do that, they break. Not for full arches of implant work. So Dental Systems is a very big piece of software and allows you to do a lot, but it's a very steep learning curve, whereas the Design Studio is a lot more straightforward, and it's a very similar, if you're already using a Trios, very similar interface to the dental desktop on the Trios, so it's quite nice to use from that perspective, and it's quicker to use as it's integrated in only one piece of software, again making it ideal for chairside manufacturers. So this was my first same-day case. This was actually in Dental Systems.
Just a brief question.
Yeah.
On average, how long does it take you to go through a fairly straightforward molar crown in the design sequence? So let's not take into account scanning, just the pure design.
The design probably depends, 5 to 10 minutes just on the design side of things. There's a video of the design thing, but it's sped up, and that's 2 minutes, and I can't remember if it's double speed, but yeah, about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something dependent on how clear my margin is on the prep, and where in the mouth it is, and how accurate I want the occlusal morphology to be, and things like that. So yeah, usually 5 minutes is sufficient to design a crown. Then I do faff around with margins and then realise that I'm probably playing around with 10 microns, and it's pointless actually, faffing quite so much.
At that point, yeah.
It's not much point. So so yeah, that was the first same day case I did, 2 together, and on the case of two units together. The first few cases I did, which weren't same day, I was a bit concerned about contact points, so I did start printing models to check them. But actually, I didn't need to, because once I got my head around the Design Studio a bit better, I got that it was relatively easy to get good contacts without having to check on the model, and I started to trust the software a bit more. This next bit of video, just of the design process, it is a slightly older version of the software, so there is the AI version now with automatic margin detection, which is even more efficient, but as you can see from this, it's quite straightforward.
We're good? Ready to go? On with the podcast, so big.
Okay. Yeah, so are we... So, yeah, this... Can you hear me okay?
I think we're online. Yes, good.
We are. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so yes, this was the final stained and glazed crown after milling. So the prep there, initial try-in, and then rubber dam and bonding. And I'll briefly go through the bonding protocol in this. Yeah, I wanted to do that, but patient wouldn't let me. So, so workflow. So this is just briefly going through what's gone on in the video. So selecting the indication, and if you've scanned it in the Trios, that will already be selected for you when it comes through to design. You then select the margin line. You can do the insertion direction, which occurs automatically, or you can change the position to look down onto the restoration and set it by your viewpoint. Your overall design from the proposal is there designed for you, and then you need to adjust it. There are lots of tools that you can then use to adjust the crown. So there's a occlusion tool for making sure your bite's right. There's the contacts tool, the interproximal contacts there, and then minimal thickness. So you want to set that to your manufacturer's recommendations for initial thickness of the material, minimal thickness of the material, sorry. Then you have something like the patient-specific motion, which you saw in that video, where it's actually using the patient's lateral excursion and anterior excursive movements to mark up where on the crown you're getting premature contacts, and then you can set that to automatically adjust it to get those excursive movements out of the bite. Dependent on the fit of these restorations, you can adjust those settings to a facilitated fit that you're happy with, so slightly tighter contact points or slightly looser contact points, a slightly more heavier occlusion, depending on what your clinical preference is. And then you can improve the design. It will give you warnings if it thinks you have put in too hard a contact between the teeth or too hard a occlusal contact. You can just accept those and bypass them if they're intentional. So you don't want to sort of overdo it, but on the flip side, you can choose. You have that flexibility to choose how you want the restoration to fit. Then the final bit is nesting it in the block. You want to choose the correct size of block, the detail level. So you've got standard definition, high definition, whether you want the sprue cut away, the position of the sprue in the block, and then send it to the mill. And there are a few things to consider on that last step as well. So then post-mill management is dependent on the material. Obviously Emax comes out in a blue state, and then you need to stain and glaze it to make it the correct color. The fit surface of the ceramic will need preparing by etching and silinating, or using something like a monobond etch and prime. And then with other materials, they just need polishing, possibly silinating, and then bonding to the tooth structure. So surface staining, trying to copy the natural teeth as much as possible. This was a case we did a few weeks ago where we had a bit of hypermineralization on the 1, 2, and 3 on the upper left, and we tried to copy that into the restoration as much as possible. We got a bit of a glare off the flash, so you can't really see it, but I have actually put a bit of hypermineralized staining on the restoration, and I just took that photo before I'd fully prepped it once I'd taken the filling out, just to see what that was like, so I could copy it with that final staining. My bonding protocol for lithium disilicates. Now this is quite complicated, but it's a lot easier than it used to be, because I used to use a steam cleaner and an ultrasonic bath. So basically, after the glazing of the restoration, you clean it with isopropyl alcohol, wash it off, prepare the fit surface with monobond etch and prime. As I said, that used to be etching, cleaning, silinating, all that, but the monobond etch and prime makes that a lot easier. Isolate under rubber dam, then sandblast the prep. Tend to use an AquaCare system with 29 micron aluminium oxide for that. And etch the tooth surface for 15 to 20 seconds. Apply a bonding agent to both sides, the Scotch bond to the tooth, and then load the restoration with cement. And then I seat that without curing the bonding agent, and then flash cure, clean up, and floss contacts. And then the setup of the order. This is some information about the Trios scanner. So you set the order, materials, and that will all transfer then straight to the Trios Design Studio. Prepare your teeth. Ideally, you want to keep the margins supragingival, just because you can scan it much more easily that way. If you can get away with it, obviously there'll be the deep restorations when you can't do that, in which case you can scan with retraction cord in place, and things like the thermocut burrs are very useful for removing soft tissue to allow you to get to the margin. Then you decide whether you want a quadrant scan or a full arch scan. To be honest, with patient-specific motion, I don't think I do as many full arch scans for single restorations, just because you don't need the teeth on the other side and put it into a virtual articulator to show where those excursive movements are going to be, because you're copying the patient's natural excursions using the patient-specific motion. You can do a pre-preparation scan as well before you prep the tooth. This is useful if you want to, say, copy something from the original tooth, or if you want to do all the scan first and then just stitch in the prep section later. And that's a really useful feature. And when I first started scanning, I was doing that a lot. Then, yeah, you can also, if you have areas where the scan isn't quite as good around the margins, you can mark the tooth, delete that margin, and then rescan it on zoom mode, which gives you a higher definition scan in that area. And you can, if you've got margins you're happy with, you can also lock those on the Trios to prevent those being rescanned and margins you're happy with being scanned over or deleted. With regards to the mill, as I was saying previously, with dental systems, what we had to do was design, export it, open it into the CAM software, choose a milling strategy, manually nest the restoration, and then send it to the mill. So lots of stages to get to the final milling process. Now with the Design Studio, you can, Trios Design Studio, you automatically nest it, and you just click produce and send to the mill. So it's sort of 3 clicks to get you to the final milling stage, so that's a lot easier and quicker than it was previously. So this is a case we did, same-day case with existing MOD amalgam restoration, and the patient wanted to replace it. So choosing the indications, we chose an Emax restoration there as an onlay, marked out our margins on the Trios scan, produced that, and this was before patient-specific motion. So we did it in the virtual articulator rather than using the patient-specific motion feature. This then was nested automatically into the block and produced. And then that's a fit surface before bonding. And then we got a really nice, I'll keep doing that, sorry. Marginal fit and blending of the margin of the tooth. Once we're finished, then again, that's the same bonding protocol there. The mill maintenance requires a daily spindle run-in of 2 minutes, cleaning and collar maintenance. So it takes probably 5 to 10 minutes to set the mill up before you start. So it's important, if you're going to do a same-day restoration, you get a member of your team doing that before you even start for the day, just so it's all ready to go and it'll throw you errors up if you don't do it. So you need to get that sorted. And then weekly maintenance is changing of the coolant and the filters. How has it changed my practice? Well, efficiency for the patients. The Trios itself has increased the treatment acceptance, just because I find it's a brilliant communication tool for the patients, being able to show them exactly why you're proposing the treatment you are and how it will benefit them. Patients are impressed by it as well, so they appreciate the investment you're making in the practice, but also it is really cool gadgetry that people look at and they really like it. And then finally, the fit of the restorations is bang on every time. I don't have remakes generally. I don't have any marginal fit issues. The occlusion barely needs adjusting on majority of cases, if at all. So yeah, it's just makes life predictable and easy. So this is a case that, when I was saying about the thermocut burrs and deep margins, this is a case I did where we had a failing inlay in the lower left second molar, and we did that as a Trios Design Studio case. I did remove that calculus, and then I've done it on Photoshop as well, just for fun. But you can see how well fitting the margin of that is, even though it's very deep. And this is the scan with the thermocut burr. So we've taken the thermocut burrs down to get rid of the soft tissue here, and then scan that, and then taken an HD photo overlay to allow us to see where the margins are before, to mark them out on the Trios scan. So that photo overlay fits over the Trios scan, so we can see exactly where the margins are. This was another same-day case we did, and the reason I put this in is because of the X-ray, really. So you can see on here, this is another chairside system, and the thickness of the cement lute on that, and the excess cement that's been squeezed out of the back, is quite significant. Whereas if you have a look at this is the Emax onlay we did using the Design Studio and the Roland, and actually you can't really see the margin or the cement lute. So it just made me realise how well things have come along since this sort of level of milling. So my team, apart from when they're rolling their eyes on me for me doing lots of digital stuff and playing with things, they do like the digital stuff generally, so it brings a degree of excitement to practice, gives more things for the staff to get involved in, upskilling of nurses as well. So my nurse is trained with Trios Design Studio level 1 and 2 of dental systems. She carries out maintenance and mills, sets up and cleans, and post-processes my 3D prints, and she trains other nurses in the practice. So all these things add to the job, and they're invaluable, really. So hints and tips. So nesting of restorations. If it's a narrow prep, you're going to get pressure on that when it mills, so you need to put the narrow section as close to the sprue as possible. Sprue buccally and lingually to avoid sprueing on the contact, so you're not ruining your contact areas on the teeth. And on the same day, use standard definition and not high definition because it's quicker. Block size, this is the harsh lesson I've learned. You need to check you selected the correct block size. The software automatically chooses a block that will fit the restoration in it. If it's chosen a smaller block and you have put a bigger block in, then it will snap your burr. So you need to make sure you get the right size of block. Now, you're not necessarily going to stock every block in every color. So again, this is important to plan beforehand. This is a injection molding case. We did a 3D design on Dental Systems injection molded composite to build up these front teeth, but we also did 2 Emax crowns. This one I milled in-house on the lower right-hand side. The one on the lower left was too big to fit in a block. So we ended up sending that out, and it was then milled in wax and then pressed in Emax because we didn't have a C16 block, and it wouldn't fit in a C14. So I had to get the lab to do that, and they didn't have a C16 either. So it's important to know which block sizes you're going to stock and pre-plan whether you're going to put the crown is going to fit within that block size, and also the shade. Take a shade when you first plan it again, so you can make sure you've got those shades in place for the day when you're actually doing the treatment. You order the blocks in boxes of 5 usually, so if you're going to order them, you need to make sure you're going to use them. So for odd colours and things, again, that might be a reason you send it out to the lab if you're not going to have, if you don't want to order a box of 5 blocks in shade C4 in size C16, you're not going to use them, then that's something to consider as well. Shades, obviously we've got lots of shades there, including a toilet shade. Some patients will want that, but again, might be one to send to the lab. So that's all I've got to say. Just try out the Trios if you're not using one. Get one of your reps to bring it in and let you try it if they'll allow it, and yeah, test it out. And it's great fun. So I think I'll pass back to you, Jenny.
Well, I think it's time to, let's say, take in some questions. I think you raised some interesting points there, and I think one of them was basically engaging your whole team into this. Like, I guess it would not make any sense for you to handle everything alone. So it's quite important to task people into, let's say, so that you can kind of manage the whole orchestra when you actually do have to execute things at a certain time and then deliver to a patient. So that must be quite crucial for.
You've got your nurses and people skilled up to do that. It takes a lot of the load off me, and it's the planning as well, because I get in the morning and I'm not really going to look through my day list and say, oh, I've got this crown at this time. Is that that's something my staff will most likely do for me. They just ply me with coffee and make sure I'm awake for the first patient. So if they can do all that, then it's much better.
Sounds like you have a very good team over there.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah. Right. Do we have any questions from the audience popping up? All right. Well, then you were talking quite a lot about the patient-specific motion, or you were actually mentioning it quite a few times. It's a relatively new function that we've now, after some beta testing, we released out for general use for our customers. And how useful do you actually find it? I think it's one thing instructing a patient how to let's say behave during the recording. Do you find that, let's say?
It's variable. Some patients you can do it easily. You say slide left, right there. and they do it straight away. Some patients just do not get it at all. So, you know, some people I get partway through and just say this isn't going to work, because you just can't get them to do what you ask them to. It's really useful if you can get it to work, the patient to do what you're asking them to do, but because you know, then you get all those excursive movements that are the patient's actual movements. You don't have to rely on sort of average values on a digital articulator. But yeah, there are those odd patients who just will not. You know, you say to them, grind to your right, and they go, how's that? You know, open their teeth up, throw their jaw all over the place. So yeah, it's not always easy, but with a bit of guidance, most people can do it, and it does work well. But get them to practice it first. So say, right, do this. Yes, that's right. Do that. And then, yeah, if they practice it, then they're much more likely to get it right when you've got the scanner in their mouth, and it's important.
I think it's there really is high value coming out of recording that sequence of motion, because it's like you said, it does reduce the scanning time. You can go with a quadrant when in the past you should have probably taken a full arch just to be able to locate it the right way in the virtual articulator. Of course, in the design software itself, you can still work with the virtual articulator even if you have the recording there, so you can still choose either one of the functionalities. But I think it's a brilliant new feature that
works really well.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I think it's time for a poll question. So we would like to basically ask you if you are ready to take the next step and actually go into same-day dentistry. So please pick an answer that is closest to your feelings at the moment, and we will get back to the results in a bit.
Yes, I am.
We kind of knew that already. So. But you're allowed to answer if you want to. I mean, good for the statistics.
Yeah.
All right. Oh. Oh yeah, one more thing I actually wanted to ask you about. You were, let's say, talking about the parameters that you can actually edit in the design software. How long did it take for you to find, let's say, the right kind of contact distances and cement gaps so that you knew that, okay, this works every time in a situation like this? How many tries did you?
The cement gap was fine straight away, to be honest. I haven't adjusted the fit surface or play with that at all. That was great from the outset. My biggest changes probably were just slightly increasing my contact point and just a slight increase of the occlusal contact as well. But really, I think within a couple of crowns, I got that, because you know I did say for the first few I did them on models. So I had one case where I'd made 2 crowns adjacent to each other, and when I fitted them onto the model, there was a slightly open contact. So I just added a bit of add-on ceramic to close that contact. I say I did. I went over to my lab and begged them to help me, and so so the next time I did it, I knew I had to make that slightly higher contact. I have actually done add-on ceramics since they taught me how to do that. But yeah, if they watch this and I say I did it, they'll know I'm telling Porcupine that. But yeah, they helped me add on and show me how to do that. So then that was fine. But after that, I've only had to do that in one case. But yeah, the rest of the time since then I've adjusted it, so I have 0.08 on my interproximal contacts as my setting, and then that just means I can do the fit, and I know I'm going to get a tight floss through it, but not too tight that I can't see the crown down. And again, that to some extent that one comes down to your setting up the insertion direction in the right place in the first instance. That when you're looking, it might be set in a certain position with the fewest undercuts or what have you, but actually when you look at it and you want to set it from the view, you get a slightly better idea of where that insertion direction should be, and then you can set it with better contact.
Very good. I think we have some poll answers right here. So, all right. So third of you is pretty much excited about going digital in terms of same-day dentistry. Some of you might need a demo. I think I think we have the request a demo button on your screen, so feel free to ask for one from one of our partners out there in your own region. And then we have 1/3 who's not really sure. We would love to find out why you're not sure, but please to write us some questions if you feel like sharing your mixed emotions with us. Doug, I think we are just about out of time. I would like to thank you very much for presenting your experiences with us. And I'm sure if anyone has any questions, feel free to write us. You have our emails under the presenter bio. So if there's something that you would like to ask from Doug, feel free to write us, and we will of course make the effort to get back to you. Thank you very much, and everyone have a good evening. And please, the recording will be available for you of this webinar on 3Shape Community, which is basically a forum, a knowledge center, a source of inspiration for digital dental professionals, and also is a way to basically get to know where 3Shape is in terms of events and exhibitions. So anyone with a 3Shape product basically has an access to 3Shape community, and you will also find the recording of this webinar right there. And also, I think at 3shape.com, sooner or later, we will have it available for anyone who doesn't have access to 3Shape community. So thank you, everyone, for watching, and see you next time.